Hey all, it's Steve with MuseThemes.com. Pumped today to show you our new Flickr widget. So this is a great way to integrate a photo gallery into your website, but the difference here is that your clients or your customers can control what photos are in that gallery. And all they need to do is simply upload their photos to a Flickr user ID. So here's how the gallery looks. This is one of two display options we have. This is the thumbnail and lightbox format. So as you can see, we have thumbnails. Of course, if we click on one of these thumbnails, it comes up in a full screen lightbox, and we can kind of switch between photos just like that. This gallery is also responsive, so it reshuffles if we shrink it down. Then we have another display option here called the full screen slider. So as you can see, this is a kind of hero looking image that takes up the full width of the browser, and we can just transition between the images using the forward and back arrows or the pagination dots below. So it's a really powerful widget, lots of options here, and really easy to set up. Let me show you how to do it. So jumping over to Muse, first thing I'll do, as always, drag the widget out onto the canvas. Okay, now that we've got the widget on the canvas, the first thing we need to talk about is how to find your Flickr user ID. So you can see the first field here says Flickr user ID. It's actually kind of challenging to find that number, so we've included this link below that says click here, click the following link to find your user ID. And if you click on this link, it allows you to enter in the username or link to a user ID, and it's going to spit out the ID itself. So let's go on to Flickr, and I'm just going to let's just select this first one. It looks like photographer Tom Hall. So if we click on his username, you can see that in the address bar here, we have his username, URL. Let's just copy that. Let's go into this tool and let's paste it in and click find. So it spits out this ID below, and this is the ID you need to enter into that widget panel. So let's go back to Muse, and I'm going to paste that in here. Okay. Done. Okay, the next thing we have is the number of images we want in our gallery. I'm going to leave this set at, let's say 10, because that works nicely, I think, for a gallery this size, but you can go up to 80 images if you want. The area below that is where we set up the type of gallery that we want. So right now we're going the thumbnail and lightbox look, but we could also click on this drop down and select full screen slider. Let's just leave it on thumbnail and lightbox first, and let's look at the lightbox image size. So this is the size of the image that's going to pop up when you click on one of the thumbnails. There's three options. There's medium. I believe medium opens at 800 by 600. There's large, which will be 1024, and these dimensions will always go to the longest side of the image. And then there's original. Original is going to load the original image size that you uploaded. So you want to be careful with this one, because if you uploaded very large, high-resolution images to Flickr, using this setting can slow down the gallery. It's pulling in giant images. So I recommend you leave it on large. Okay, now that we've set those two up, let's look at where we're positioning this on the page. If we just have this frame kind of set in the middle, not touching the outer boundaries, and we preview it in the browser, you can see that it's going to fill that area there, but it's not responsive. To make the gallery responsive, what you need to do is you need to set this to full width using that button in the top right, or you could drag the outer edges to touch the outside of the screen. Now with the gallery like this, if we preview it in the browser, you can see it's much wider, it's taking up the full width, and as I move it down, it's going to reshuffle. Okay, so that's how the thumbnail and lightbox version works. Now, if we click on the full screen slider version, we need to make sure also with this that we have it set to full width in Muse. You cannot use the full screen slider version if you don't have it set to the full width of the canvas. The next options we have in the full screen slider that appear when you select that is to turn on and off the pagination controls, or the dots at the bottom, and we can change the transition style. So right now it's set to fade between images. We could select slide, and let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to move this up to the top, and let's preview it in the browser. And once I do, and once our gallery loads, if I just transition between two of the images, you can see that now it slides instead of fades. So that's what that setting controls. Okay, let's jump back to Muse and let's look at our other settings we have. So I'm going to go back to the thumbnail and lightbox display. We'll leave the image size set at large, and in the gallery styling area below, you can see that we have controls for things like thumbnail size, padding, some of the colors, and overlay effects. So let's up our thumbnail size to something like 300. They were pretty small before. Padding is the area between the thumbnails, kind of this white space you're seeing in there. We'll leave that set at 5. The Lightbox background overlay color. Now let me preview this in the browser to show you what that looks like. So in our gallery, you can see we now have much bigger thumbnails. And if I click on one of them, when it loads up, there is a slight overlay behind. And that's what the overlay color is. The opacity on this is quite light, so you're not seeing it very much. So let's go ahead and change the opacity down to say 0.3, so it's much darker. Now you can also set an image filter overlay on the thumbnails themselves. So right now we actually have a dark color, and in the preview, if I kind of mouse over these, you can see how they tend to highlight or that overlay disappears. So right now we have it set just at a standard color overlay, but you could do things like sepia or grayscale or blur. There's lots of options. We can also change the opacity on that. And the last option that we have that isn't grayed out here is for the previous and next buttons. So this is how you can change the color. Maybe we'd want to go with something like white. Now these options below are only available if we go back to the full screen slider version. And these options are pretty similar to what you had above. We have the ability to change the pagination stroke and opacity. And we can also change the pagination fill and opacity. Those, if you remember, are the dots at the bottom, these guys down here. So that's how the Flickr Gallery widget works. I think this is one of our best widgets, and I do think that a lot of users are going to find this really, really helpful for having their clients manage their own photos and portfolios. If you have any questions or concerns with this widget, as always, don't hesitate to give us a show. Thanks again, and best of luck. Cheers.